Hi everybody. Thanks to Agnès Giard for inviting me in this strange universe that I don't know much about. Even if I had a chance to observe cosplay in Tokyo on Takeshita Dori, like any good tourist does. I'd like to allow myself to connect this expanding phenomenon to several questions that will put Chiaraca as a witness to our times and as a connection to anthropological issues of all times, those of desire and identity. This will take us into the world of fiction, and more precisely of the fake that becomes a ritournelle, as Deleuze would put it, with deep penetration in our minds we do not consider seriously enough, from my point of view. So my title in broken English, in French, is L'extension du domaine du fake. It paraphrases Welbeck's novel, which I don't particularly like, but it has a direct connection with this self-fiction that allows one to survive. But this is the only one standpoint on the issue. I'd like to show the pluralism of interpretation of the process underway. And the period we have just lived through, the pandemic, it has profoundly changed our standards of self-presentation in public. As the mask has spread around the world in public space and particularly in transport systems, and this barrier was already familiar in Japan and other Asian countries for various reasons, from due to previous pandemic experiences, urban pollution, or more generally out of respect for distance for others. This change in the culture of face is a profound cultural shock that will have to be repeated in order to become part of the practices of Europeans in particular, as the presentation of the open face is a rule of the modern public space. All the more so since the wearing of masks and anything else that can cover the face and prevent recognition by the other was even more condemned since the terrorist attacks and the extension of security laws in many countries. It's as if the demand for transparency is becoming all the more important in political and moral discourse, while at the same time, disguised devices are becoming more and more widespread and sophisticated, and while the rule of fake is being extended to every bit of behavior, as I will try to demonstrate. But in fact, this is a two-sided statement, and it's not acceptable in modern ontology, And this is indeed the prototype of the modern vision of the world, as Bruno Latour framed it. There's no alternative in some way. You have to be authentic or deceptive, and the technical devices are indicative of the choice you make. In the same way, the settlers required traditional people to choose between the belief that the fetish, and Bruno Latour called them fetishes, and the fetish had real power to act as deities, and the fact that they were crafted by humans. They had to choose between the two standpoints. That's a very important pressure that would put on the natives, as we used to say. In fact, traditional civilization all share the idea that fetishes are fabricated, of course, but because they are well made, they have a power of their own, and thus they become deities. And the experience we are living in a globalized world will force us to rethink the mask and our status in a way that is closer to tradition, something Japan has always been good at it, since it doesn't have the same demand for the modern break as European countries. And this allows us to refer to Philippe Descolat's work, and specifically at the Musée du quai Branly, where he has produced a wonderful exhibition on the fabric of images in 2010. In particular, I'd like to select those images of masks, which are the very tools, and not so much images in the Western sense of the world, but tools of the animist worldview, of these ontologies that Descolat opposes to totemism, analogism, and naturalism. The masks are then always double. They are called transformation masks. For the animals are authentic in their appearance, what the scholar calls externalities, provided that their interiority, their souls, which have human traits, are revealed. The mask amplify or make visible the double status of the animals. And when humans team up with them, they are part of the same ontology, since the two possess external appearances and an interiority that they can make visible in a ceremony, for instance, by wearing a jaguar or eagle mask and so on. In short, there is no contradiction between quasi-biometric transparency, as required in our times, and the technical skin that is the mask. And the most fooled in this situation would be the modernist, who believes he has grasped the subject by the mere objectification of his biometric signals. And I'd like to refer to Lacan's expression, the French psychoanalyst. When he used the play on words, not so easy to translate, he said, the non-fooled wonder, which means in French, le non-dupe erre, which means that those who believe they are able to escape their own fiction, they are condemned to wonder, to become agitated without being able to reconcile themselves. And I think it can be useful to think about that. The etymological filiation of the term persona could also be exploited. Persona constitutes an essential ontological and legal basis in languages of Latin origin. Persona comes from personare, which means the masks that the characters of Greek and Roman theater used to amplify their voices. Far from deceiving or concealing the actor's being, the mask amplified what constitutes their role. It stylized their role, giving power to their bodies and to the character at the same time. His biological face is hidden, but his voice is amplified to make the feature of the character he embodies more visible with the design of the mask. And since then, the paradox of the actor that Diderot proposed has thus become a constant source of reflexivity about our identity. To allow us to get out of a form of positivism or clinging modernism, of naturalism, as Descartes would say. We have never been modern, Bruno Latour said. And when we apply that to masks, it can be translated as, yes, we know, however, which means we know that masks are artifacts, but they still say better what we are, our interiorities. That is to say, something other than biological material. This is the expression used by Octave Manoni, who rephrased the story of Talayezva in Sunshift, the autobiography of a Hopi Indian. Hopi children must be initiated when 8 years old, and they receive at this time, when they receive with pain, the revelation that the Kachinas are not gods, since it is their parents who incarnate them. But this secret must not be revealed because the god then would not come during the ceremonies anymore. Yes, I know these are my parents moving the Kachinas, but still they are gods visiting the village. Yes, I know, but still. It seems to me that to be the right non-modern expression to access what is at stake in the Kyaraka. Getting out of hasty judgments or abusive diagnosis about the state of the contemporary world, because it implies taking seriously all the work of these person/characters who will force us to return to a less divisive conception of our own existence, to a form of reconciliation with the fictional beings that we are. However, I've just sort of stated my conclusion, but do not leave, please, since there are more steps and arguments before we reach it. But because there are, in my opinion, there are other uses of Kyaraka and otaku that do not necessarily fall under this vision, and that researchers who are working on this issue have well highlighted. So I will use a compass that I call cosmopolitical compass, that I designed in order to display the various standpoints that we can adopt to describe this culture, depending on how much certainties and detachment we are ready to accept. I designed this compass as a resource, first as a resource to explore the pluralism of political positions, but also to open opportunities for dealing with issues and innovation. And of course, it's clearly inspired by the works of Bruno Latour and Isabelle Stengers. So using this compass, you see that Chirac will fit really well in the pure lineage of tradition. We can just put it in this quadrant. And of course, it will be kind of a revival of animist ontology, or more precisely, in the case of Japan, analogist ontologies, according to Descola. And as a result, we would only be dealing with an extension of trends that are already well entrenched in Japanese society, and basically unlikely to teach us anything in their more media-oriented versions. But the insistence on the link with tradition is nevertheless one of the positions that can be taken, from one of the point of view that can be adopted, and that will be useful for any society, so that they do not get trapped, for example, in the cult of innovation, or of our hyper-connected worlds with permanent high frequency and no memory anymore. However, there is another use of Chirac, a more modernist one. So that's the other quadrant, lower quadrant, and it can also be detected in the extension of the uses of these characters in commercial operations or institutional communication. It was shown by Ayara Hiroyuki in a book published in 2007 called, let's try, Kyaraka Suru Nippon, Kyara in Japan, or the Kyarification of Japan. And people who want to possess a favorite character they can find in everyday products like cups, pencils, or clothing. And this will provide them with consolation, protection, healing, and so on. Of course, there is still a relationship to spirituality. It's still present, but its propagation and transformation into commercial devices shows how different references can be mobilized for the same features of characters, Even politicians use fictitious characters to appear in the media and communicate with the public. Companies or institutions will exploit this principle, which aims to embody the legal person, far beyond a logo or conventional communication material, Mascots can be created to carry the identity of a region, what is called regional characters, Gotoshi characters. For the principle does indeed aim to reach the public as a person beyond the message itself. The mask and the characterization become, in this case, triggers for attachment to the brands. This is something all advertisers are looking for. But the diffusion of these characters means for the brand a self-rewriting of its own story, which has consequences within the company itself. Because employees, for instance, will be called upon to play the game in all kinds of events, or on social networks to stage the corporate spirit, But this modern posture is gradually detaching itself from tradition, since all artifice is good for the staging, It's fairly easy to criticize this strategic manipulation of collective attention for commercial purposes, of course, along the lines of a criticism of advertising, And the issue of distinction that Bourdieu so aptly described is central to all selections of relevant features. But in this case, it's reoriented for strategic purposes. It's a little bit different. A specific effect is sought to gain access to the cultural trends of a targeted audience. This is really a strategic purpose. But this critique, in some ways, against strategies of explicit manipulation of the public by exploiting characterization, somewhat misses the contemporary stakes, from my point of view. Because from now on, it's no longer a real strategy in the classical sense, but a full mode of existence that is generalized and extended to all relationship. A mode of existence that orient our reciprocal perceptions toward more and more fake. Tradition is still there as a source, of course, and the modern strategic and commercial dimension can also be present, but the Chirac movement can now be read in a systematic game of attracting attention in all areas of our activities, from the most ordinary to the most sophisticated. From a quest for a few likes on Instagram, a few choice of images on Tinder, to the production of financial signal by traders' algorithm, or to any campaigns of influence. And this extension of the domain of fake is a challenge as such for those who would like to criticize it, because it's everywhere. It has penetrated our minds in depth. But I claim that Chirac has other possibilities that the fans know well. It can offer a way out of this relativistic universe. But let's first get through the dimension of this extension of the fake, of which Chirac is a part. Well, there are three dimensions. The first one is related to the competition for attention. This is now considered as a scarce resource. We know that pretty well in the economy of attention. And it's highly sought for by brands in a climate of depletion of economic growth, especially. Social media have been very clever enough to build a specific arena for this competition for attention, to monetize it for their own benefit, and to build all the devices, indicators, metrics, and so on, that set the minds of everyone towards the glory meter of our times. That was a term used by Tard, Gabriel Tard, 120 years ago. On social media, brands and individuals share the same appetite for reputation, for visibility. And this is part of a deep learning process that molds contemporary culture. In order to attract attention, you can use a very different strategy. There are what we call many regimes that are available. And I still use another compass for that. So the loyalty regime, which rely on old style, long duration, low intensity relationship with the brands, for instance, between brands and consumers. The projection regime, and this one is a long duration that is really considered as the meaning of being attentive. When you are focusing your attention, you are concentrated and so on. So it's long duration, high intensity, but it's very costly in cognitive loads. The alert regime, the third one, or awareness if you prefer, where there is short duration, high intensity, and this is the one we experience in notifications, for instance, and especially in all the life we live on the social networks, of course. And the immersion regime, the last one, long duration, high intensity, and this is the one we experience in video games. So the last two ones, alert and immersion, they've been tremendously amplified by the digital ecosystem, with the one made of social media, video, high-frequency flows, and so on. In this case, in this view of the world, I would say, or this the world we inhabit in this way, we are always shocked by some weird behavior of people online or on site, and it's enough to trigger attention. And the bonus, of course, goes to the most original and surprising signal. This has been demonstrated for fake news by Vosugi in a paper in Science in 2018. By the way, I want to be clear about the fact that I will deliberately avoid dealing with fake news because the kind of conceptual confusion that exists now, I think it's too risky on this highly sensitive topic. However, there is an ability to generate a storytelling about a character which is more than that, because it not only the instant attraction of attention, it also captures durable attention. It puts individuals and followers into a whole new social world, and these fictions may gain the status of true fictions. And this is what platforms and brands want to achieve. Let's think about Pokemon Go, for instance. It was very powerful at demonstrating the immersive power of a transmediatic proposal that subordinates urban settings to the shared online gaming experience. So the alert regime of attention and the immersive one, they were combined for the purpose of blurring this old division of spheres of activities so that the triggers for engagement operate anywhere and anytime. There is a second dimension of the extension of fake, and it's the reduction of the status of any entity to mere signals. We can start from memetics, and it's a good start for understanding how the narration that captures attention relies on elementary features that are propagated and replicated, which means not only viral but transformed through the propagation processes. In Chirac, the design of clauses, of names, of gestures, of scenes must be carefully targeted for the purpose of their propagation within a milieu, and as much as possible outside the specific milieu to obtain a better reach. The reduction to signals that are easily transmitted and replicated is a process that is now extended to all social and economic activities. And this is largely due to the high-frequency mode of training that is invading the financial industry, that have been invading in the financial industry for years. But it's now contaminating all other industries, all economic agents. They become experts in delivering the right signals at the right moment just to influence the perception of their activity by investors, to change their expectations, their anticipation, and so on. And you can see also financial algorithms that are designed specifically to detect these signals from a specific agent or from the market as a whole in order to trigger their behaviors. Traders and algorithms on the platforms adopt many techniques to oblige others to declare their positions. For instance, how much they are ready to pay for a specific asset, and what it will be useful for them in order to bet on it and to front-run all of them. And these techniques include, for instance, methods like quote stuffing, for instance. The expression is quite clear. It automatically displays a huge number of fake orders that will fool the other traders' computers and prevent them from interpreting our own position. There are many other techniques that are used to fool the agents, or many ways to manipulate signals that can be computed and modeled. But we should not consider that as a strange world only interested in speculative activities. In fact, speculation is becoming the general trend of all social activities, from Instagram top models to news agencies. And the extension of Chirac phenomenon could be part of that process. Speculation means beating on the expectations through the manipulation of perception, and its etymology is related to specular, the mirror effect, where everyone is testing his or her own image from another's point of view. In our days, publishing ourselves is a speculative activity based on the anticipation of the public's perception. And for this purpose, the expertise in fake design is required now. This trend existed long before the digital times, I agree. And in other sub-social world than finance, publication, or Chirac. The only change brought in by digital transformation is its amplification, through the extension of this behavior to many lay people, and through the acceleration of the rhythm of cycle of publication, perception, reaction, into what I call a high-frequency social life. But this accelerated rhythm is changing our ability to select the signals, so that we are not ready anymore to waste some time to decide among the signals, to decide their hierarchy, to test their relevance, to test their veracity. Because social media platforms have been designed for generating reactivity, not reflexivity or judgments as such, but instant reactions that are computed as engagement and sold to brands. So changing our mindset into an extreme sensitivity to signals of that kind at a high-speed pace is at the core of the extension of the domain of fake. And it makes all of us learn new standards of behavior. And this is the last dimension, the learning process itself. And this learning process is shared by individuals as well as by large economic or institutional agents. Learning is supposed to become the main power in the hand of machine learning experts, which is the operational name of artificial intelligence. They are supposed to be able to detect patterns into large data sets. We call them big data. And not only that, but they are able to process them by using probabilities that make predictions more and more reliable in any domain. So when we discuss that, we usually put the emphasis on how do they achieve that and how far it can go. But the issue of who learns during this new quantification activity should be considered as more crucial, according to Shoshana Zuboff, who speaks of a division of learning that replaces the division of labor. And all that for the benefit of the systemic platforms that are the only ones that own the data, that own the computing power, and the expertise. However, this kind of colonization of the minds is now deeply entrenched through the everyday activity on social media, for instance. It's not just a question of expertise in industrial areas and so on. Everyone learns how to trigger attention by sending the right signals, how to cheat on identities, how to seduce or to convince by manipulating pictures and hashtags. Keyaraka learning is part of this large learning process, where the design of signals that attract attention becomes a basic skill. To the point that that was not really anticipated when coaches used to say, well, you must learn how to sell yourselves for the purpose of job-seeking activities, for instance. In fact, it's extended now in the sense of the social arenas in which this skill is becoming valuable and rewarded. There are many more social arenas where it works. It's extended also in the sense of the expertise that is required to make the signal attractive. One must learn at the basic level how to obtain high scores of visibility, of reputation, and whatever the quality of the relevance of the personal accomplishment as such. It means that to become a media goes far beyond becoming a character. But in this high-frequency fake world, once again, the medium is the message. We are supposed to accept to expose ourselves as characters and protagonists in a script that platform wrote for us. But at a more risky level, we must learn also how to fool people, as much as deep fake videos are able to do it in digital systems. When face recognition systems are advertised as the next standards, even in public places, well, the only reasonable behavior in order to protect oneself against this general surveillance policy is to learn how to cheat and fool the algorithm. This is why in a country such as France, where debates on the right to wear a veil or not are raging almost every year, you can be sure that controversy about makeups, tattoos, jewels, hair design, all that is part of Keyaraka, will be raised over and over. Just because people will need that, they will need that to protect themselves from these intrusions in their privacy, against a policy where a system dévisage, in French, dévisage, you stare at you. Maybe, I'd like to propose that, I think we should consider character play as a basic skill that should be learned in school for the sake of individual freedom and economic performance. So, we made this move from tradition to relativism, to fakeism, as I will call it, and I insisted on the fact that the modern intermediary step of advertising and its strategy of communication has been transformed into a general fake culture. But the question is this a world worth living in? And my answer is quite clear. No, it's not. Because of the destruction of the conditions for a public sphere to exist, and a public sphere that will not be plagued by high frequency, fake news, distrust, and so on. But does it mean that we cannot learn from these processes of Keyaraka in their local or extended forms? Does it mean that we have to endorse again the clear-cut division of interiorities and exteriority that the modern built? In this model, there was only one biological identity that is the final and only guarantor. Now, the problem is that it's more and more in legal situation, it's more used as such. And of course, it can be so easily tracked and computed that it fulfills all the requirements of the authoritarian liberalism. And at the same time, it helps platforms produce a behavioral surplus, as Shoshana Zuboff calls it. So we should need to escape this tracking, in both commercial and authoritarian. But it should not mean preserving some more authentic and private kernels of our identity. This is how we'll get fooled by these authentication processes. In face recognition system, for instance. The only way to protect ourselves from this intrusion and predation of our traces is to advocate a deeper right to fictional identities, which is the real status of any ID. So let us quit this modern belief in biological identities that make us unable to accept our ontological status as true fictions. Naming a baby, this is producing a fiction. Attributing a place in the order of generation by recognizing that fatherhood or motherhood are fictions, but they can become legal ones. And this makes a huge difference. It cannot be rearranged for commercial, speculative, or expressive purposes, but we still can play with it because of this robust institutional design that stays in the background. On the other hand, avoiding this assignation to a biological status of identity should not oblige us to accept the general rule of fakeism. This fakeism is corrupting everything from our economy and institution to our personal relationships. And this is where Chirac is so useful for our extraction from the domain of fake. Playing on identities is not just producing signals for reputation. It can be an initiation kind of experience, where everyone can accept that human beings as legal entities are fundamentally designed as true fictions. And this is how this last version of Chirac can redeem the loss of tradition. It can help us reconsider the way we live with our myth, our spirits, our characters, our fictions, including ourselves. So we may reconcile ourselves with all that have been disqualified and excluded from the modernist view of the world, in order to promote this ultimate fiction of an autonomous and calculating agent. What I would call a cosmopolitical experience of Chirac is the best cure to accept our existence of narrative beings, of true fictions that have a long and deep connection with tradition. But in this quadrant, the last one, remember, but these traditions now are used in a more playful and spiritual mode of existence. This is why I call them cosmopolitical, because it reassembles all the features of what we listed on the kind of Chirac possibilities. It's not wasted anymore. The use of this tradition is not wasted anymore into this competitive and relativist one that the domain of fake encapsulate. So thank you. That's my hope, my prediction, I would say, that Chirac can help us get out of this domain of fake that is invading us. Thank you for your attention.